Pastor Gabriel takes praise. Thank you.
May all that we do be pleasing in your sight. Guide us as this business here today is conducted in your name and to your glory. We ask this in the blessed name of our Lord and Savior Christ Jesus, who taught us when we pray to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Please sit down. Thank you. We now move on to apologies, please. We currently have apologies for Councillor Blackburn, Councillor Smith and Councillor Kane. Do we have any further apologies, please? No, so noted. Thank you. Declarations of interest, please. The type of interest and also why you have the interest. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor, I wish to declare a prejudicial interest as a council-appointed Director of Blackpool Housing Company under item 4B. Should the matter in question be discussed, I will naturally leave the chamber.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Singleton.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yes, it's the same as well.
Thank you. Councillor Clapham.
Thank you. I have a disclosable pecuniary interest due to the contract awarded between the Council and Blackpool Sixth Form College concerning Head Start creative experiences set out in the agenda item 4B of the Deputy Leader's report to the Council. I am a Director of Blackpool Sixth Form College.
Thank you for that very succinct apology, Councillor. Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you. I have a residual interest in the Blackpool Housing Company as a councillor on the board on agenda 4B.
Okay, I'm obliged. Thank you. Any further apologies, please? Excuse me, declaration of interest. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of February 2018, pages 1 to 6. Are we in agreement that they are a true and correct record, colleagues? I thank you. We have no announcements this evening, so we now move on to executive reports, please. I believe as Councillor Blackburn is away, Councillor Campbell, you're stepping up to the plate this evening. Thank you.
I am indeed, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. Not much to add to the Leader's report, apart from one thing. He has recently been contacted by Plan UK, and I'm pleased to announce that Councillor Vicky Singleton is the Council's first ever girls' rights champion. So I'm sure we can all say congratulations. I look forward to doing a lot of hard work. But apart from that, Mr Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions and answer them if I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. We will do as we normally do, please, and go through page by page. Please signal if you'd like to make any questions or any comments. Thank you. So, page 7, please. Councillor Mrs Callow was first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It's just a comment, really, about the state of the finances of the council due to government cuts and austerity. But what really intrigues me is why we have got so much money left in certain ward budgets, and in particular, ward budgets in areas that are suffering from deprivation. I'm looking at you now, Mr Deputy Mayor, but I wouldn't dream of saying how much you've got in your coffers. But the money that's still in the coffers of some of the wards that actually have very little money really does surprise me. The residents there, some of them living almost in poverty. I wouldn't say poverty. And there's so much that you can do to help communities with your ward funding. And if I can just pat myself and Peter on the back, at the end of this financial year, we've got 51 pence left because we've spent the money on the residents of Norbreck. And I do think, Mr Deputy Mayor, it is a great pity that some councillors can't use their imagination, perhaps, and spend some of the money where it's much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on page 7, please? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to the shortfall again this year, which is another £2 million, which is disappointing because every year we do hear that there's enough time left to catch up and we will get there. All credit to Mr Thompson and his team for putting these figures together. But as I said in the budget meeting, you've no chance of delivering it. You didn't deliver this and you'll not deliver the next one. The other point on the same page is the Adult Social Care Support Grant. I note that the leader wants to put this to one side to consider how it's going to be spent appropriately. There are enough guidelines as to how this can be spent, and I'd like some assurances that it's going to be ring-fenced totally for adult social care and not integrated into any of the budgets. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions? Page 7. Move on to page 8, please. Councillor Mrs Callow.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I refer to the residents' survey. This does concern me greatly. We're told that we need to do a survey through the Local Government Association. I really don't know why they have to tell us what to do. I would like to know how much this survey is going to cost. But what really bothers me is that people are going to have phone calls and they're going to answer the phone and it's going to be somebody from Blackpool Council. But at our group meeting the other evening, we said, well, once these crooks and awful people out there hear about this, they'll be ringing people up and saying, or they could do, we're from Blackpool Council. Now, for example, can we just ask you a few questions? Do you have a green bin? Oh, so you pay £30 a year for your green bin. Well, if you give us all your details of your bank account, we'll be able to give you your £30 back. They could be doing this once they find out that the council are going to be ringing up people in their own homes. It's an absolute disgrace. Some members will remember that I had a notice of motion some years ago calling on the government to clamp down on all these bogus calls, all this cold calling that really does upset people. You'll be knocking on doors next when you're doing your survey. It is an absolute intrusion. Somebody may be at home not feeling very well. Somebody could have passed away in the family. They could be waiting for an urgent phone call and they get a call from Blackpool Council saying, can you just answer a few questions? It doesn't matter how nicely it's put, whatever time that you ring people up, it is still inconvenient and a nuisance. And I think that we should be setting an example as a council by not doing this. And I would like to see the end of all these calls to people in their own homes when they're not needed and not wanted. And at the end of the day, what is the survey going to prove? And why should we do what the Local Government Association tell us what to do? Who are they at the end of the day? Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. You can tell that I'm very, very annoyed about this.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to echo exactly Councillor Callow's sentiment. This is an absolute shambles. The fact that we're pre-announcing we're going to start cold calling, and that's what it is, on residents of Blackpool, opens the doors for any unscrupulous people who want to phone up now and say, hello, you've read we're phoning you from the council. Well, I'm from the council. Exactly what Mrs Callow says. We are a no cold calling town. We all supported unanimously the motion that Councillor Callow put through 3 or 4 years ago. And now we've been hypocrites by cold calling residents in Blackpool to ask them what they think of council services. Go out in the street and ask them. We do. I'll tell you what the answers are. It's quite simple. It's morally wrong. It's probably illegal. Have we checked with the telephone preference service as to which numbers we can phone and we can't phone? It could even be illegal. It certainly goes against the grounds of ethos. It's disgraceful. We're having to do this. And we're having to do this because we haven't done it sooner. The LGA say we need to catch up on this. So, all right, we'll get on the telephones then. It's the cost, it's the hypocrisy, it's the absolute nuisance of it. And I, for one, will tell any resident, if they get one of these calls, to hang up and complain to Ofcom.
Thank you. Any further questions on page 8, please? Move on to page 9. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Just an observation, really, regarding the winter gardens. I do sometimes go along Coronation Street, and the doors there to the winter gardens on occasions are locked. I see people going up to the doors and they can't get in and they walk away. Now, I can understand why they're locked, perhaps for security, but I do feel that if we could put a notice on there and tell people to go round the front in Church Street, then we would not lose the trade. These people may be going there for a meal or for a drink or anything, and I've seen numerous people going to these doors, rattling them, they're locked, and there's no indication at all of any other entrance to the winter gardens. So if somebody could look into that, it would perhaps give us some more trade. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on page 9, please? Move on to page 10. Councillor Williams, please.
I'm referring to the speculation of the job increases on the enterprise zone. Numbers plucked out of thin air, really. Projections of 3,000 jobs. That's only if every business that starts up in the enterprise zone survives. Business churn at the moment is quite high. If you look at the enterprise zone in Thornton, they've always got vacancies. Not every company will survive. Some will go under, some will expand. I accept that. But 3,000, oh, we're going to create 3,000 jobs. It's a lot of rubbish. It's a number plucked out of thin air. There's no data behind that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, whatsoever. It's just speculative. And as I say, there'll be churn. There'll be businesses that won't exist, that won't survive. Businesses will increase. But it's ridiculous putting numbers out like this. It's false.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Deputy Mayor. The job centre that's moving into the town hall, could I just ask why it's taken so long? The scaffolding and building work seems to have been going on there for years. It's been an absolute eyesore. I am delighted that it looks tidier. It looks a lot tidier today, and we are making progress and they're moving in. But is there a reason why it's taken so long? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions on the Leader of the Council's report, please? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I wanted to comment about some really good news that Blackpool had last week about the potential award of £3 million for the fibre broadband unlocking, really, of what we've actually got already under the tram line. What this actually will do, Mr Deputy Mayor, in terms of the technology, it puts us into the technological big league of cities around the UK and gives us a major competitive advantage. However, in order for us to utilise that competitive advantage, I wondered if the leader or the leadership, if Councillor Campbell could summarise what the plan would be, if we are to actually either create a project which will have a reseller sell the broadband for us to the residents and the businesses in the town, or if we create a council-owned company to do it. Because what we actually have is a potential goldmine of technology, and it will transform this town in a way that the Promenade and the Piers once did. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Clapham, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mine's on the final paragraph before it says working with partners, and it's telling us that we've now commissioned York Aviation, the specialist aviation consultants, to go forward and look at a strategy for the airport. This is extremely welcome because there are a number of businesses who have been waiting to see an initiative being brought forward by the council since we purchased the airport. It does say that we're going to get the report in May, but I'm hoping the implementation of some initiatives to actually push forward the airside businesses at the airport as soon as possible. I think it is a missed opportunity as it is at the moment It's quite dormant, but there are a lot of people there waiting for us to make the right moves. Hopefully this is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. My question is in relation to the very last sentence of the report relating to the Customer First Office and the change in the opening times to 10 a.m. on Wednesdays. With the main Customer First telephone number still operational from 9 a.m, I would like to ask, will that number be fully functional? Because one of the frequent complaints I receive is that people can't get through on that number. There is no facility to leave a message, no facility for someone to come back to people, just a message that says there's no one available to take your call, try the website or call later. Whilst I appreciate that we are trying to encourage people to use online systems, telephone is the method of choice for some people, and a lot of people don't have access to the internet. So could we ensure, please, that that number is available for those people who need to get through? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Callow.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It's a question for the Deputy Council Leader. Why have people from Knowsley been seen inspecting trees on grass verges in Norbreck? I'm assured that this is the case, and I'd like to know why they're there. Okay. I have another question.
Please, please.
Yeah, carry on. Anyone who caught last night's news on TV will have been shocked to know that Blackpool has some of the worst roads and potholes in Lancashire. In fact, we come third. This is what we're advised. Why are we so badly off for potholes all over the town? I mean, I can't understand this. I can't understand it, but there they are on the promenade and filming. They're everywhere, and it's very bad news for Blackpool, I can assure you. Instead of drawing people in, it's turning them away. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Mrs Callow, please.
Thank you. I'd just like some information, please. If the Deputy Leader or the Leader, when he's back, can tell the Council how much this Council has received in 17-18 from government and other grants, the grand total, government grants and grants from other organisations, the grand total, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further general questions, please? Councillor Mr Williams.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Just want to concur with my colleague, Councillor Michelle Scott, regarding the 477 number. We're about to start a cold calling campaign where we're going to bombard people with calls, yet we don't give them the same courtesy they can get through to us. It's impossible to get through. And as she says, there's no excuse, there's no answer phone, there's no we'll call you back. It's disgraceful. We're offering a first-class service and we're not giving it. Simple as that. The other question I'd like to ask is in regard to the museum. I've noted that we've employed a company owned by a chap called Andy Spinoza, who I know, who was a public relations and communications company based in Manchester. Why have we employed them for that particular issue or any other general issue? We've got a perfectly good communications team ourselves. They do an adequate job, if more than better than other councils. What is it costing to hire Andy and his team, and for how long, and why? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for the promotion. Any further questions, colleagues? Councillor Campbell, would like to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Okay. Councillor Mrs Callow, ward budgets. Yeah, you talked about this at scrutiny, and I think I said at the time, I'm just speaking personally here, I've been holding back my ward budget for quite some time now, in the hope to put some into the newly created At the Grange, which was formerly known as the CLC, I can't speak for my other colleagues, but I'm sure, I'm every confidence that the ward budgets will be used in full before the next election. Councillor Williams, the shortfall, yep, I've got every confidence as well that we will meet our target in the end. The adult social care support grant, yes, it will be ring-fenced. Councillor Mrs Callow and Councillor Williams, actually, just to make it really clear that seen as the best way of getting residents' opinion, because as someone said, you know, not everyone has access to online, we can't do it that way. Just to say as well that the Conservative Party do commission telephone surveys before every election as well, and we do have some examples of other councils, Conservative councils, that use telephone surveying. So we're not any different from these people. We will, however, if anyone has any concerns, they could do as Councillor Williams suggests and say no and put the phone down, or they could say, I'll get back to you, and they can phone the council and see if this is legitimate. Yeah? I'll come to that. Well, we are. Councillor Mrs Callow, the door on Coronation Street, yeah, that is sometimes closed when there is a private function. It's a very operational matter, but I'll pass that on to the Winter Gardens to look at signage for you. Yeah. Councillor Williams, 3,000, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, the Enterprise Zone. The Enterprise Zone is one of the most successful so far. It's already seen 500 jobs being created, so I don't think we're overstretching ourselves to try and get 3,000. Councillor Mrs Callow, the job centre, yeah, it did take a long time, but as I'm actually very impressed by the left. It looks like it's always been part of the building. I think that had a lot to do with it, but I'm happy to see if there's any other reason why it overran. But it does look much better now, and you may have seen that we've replaced the glass as well above Customer First, and it's going to be repainted. Councillor Galley, the broadband bid, yeah, exciting news. That is going to make it much easier to get the broadband to the enterprise zone, obviously, which will help when it comes to businesses coming in. But yeah, really, really pleased with that. Councillor Mrs Scott, change to the hours. I don't know, but I'm assuming possibly the change to the hours may be to do with staff training, but I can certainly find out for you. The telephone number, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have as many staff these days due to government cuts. And we do prefer people to try and get things done online. I appreciate not everyone can, but just like to thank everybody for bearing with us when it comes to answering telephone calls. Councillor Mr Callow, Knowsley Tree Inspectors in Norbrick. I don't know what that's about, Councillor, so I will get someone to get back to you on that one. When it comes to potholes, I've just seen this before I stepped into the chamber. We are third, but I believe Lancashire and Blackburn come before us, which are very large areas. And I am being told that someone called Mr Pothole has been in Blackpool, and he doesn't think it's too bad, so he's obviously an expert, Mr Pothole. The public can report, obviously, any potholes they come across. I'm constantly phoning the office to report them, but you can report them online as well. Councillor Mrs Callow, government grants. Obviously, I don't have that information. We can get that for you. And other grants from other organisations, yeah. All I would say, though, I think Councillor Williams said something at Budget Council about the amount of grants and things we've had. They are capital grants, but when you take into account the amount of revenue we have lost, it in no way makes up for what we've lost. And you, Councillor Williams, you talked about the phone line. The answer is the same for Councillor Mrs Scott. And the outside comms. Now, yeah, the museum project did use, because we wanted to, when it came to the bowler hat, we wanted to have that as big an impact as we possibly could. So it was in a couple of nationals, as you'll have seen. But when it comes to price, etc., I don't know. But we will get that for you. Thank you, Mr Deputy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss you out? Where are you? Oh, the airport. Yeah, sorry. Yes. We're already doing as much as we possibly can when it comes to airside operations, as I'm sure you understand. But the new master plan will obviously give that the much needed boost that it requires. I think we should see something very, very shortly, and we'll make sure you see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Please enjoy your sitting down for a few seconds. We now move on to the Deputy Leader of the Council's report. Councillor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry, I'll just find it. Okay. Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Happy to take questions on my report, but obviously just a little bit of an update. Members will have seen the unfortunate news that the rail reopening has been delayed by 3 weeks. Very disappointing, but it's just fantastic that our bus company has managed to step in and actually keep the rail replacement buses going. It's not ideal. Unfortunately, we do have to live with it because we have nothing to do with that side of things. But we're in discussions with Northern Rail at the moment, looking at special ticketing offers in Blackpool, and once they relaunch the actual service. And they've also agreed to consider sponsorship of future events in the town. So that's a little bit of good news. But apart from that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. We shall see if there's any questions for you. Well, page 11, please. Any questions on page 11? Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm referring to the £1 million, another set of funding we've very happily received in regard to shop fronts on 6 streets in Blackpool. I understand and I can grasp the idea of doing this, but it's been said to me by several people, what about the people who've been sensible, invested in their properties and have got good shop fronts? And those that haven't, absent landlords included, are now going to get a benefit of being able to apply for a grant to have theirs improved. Also, I believe that certain shops and criteria, betting shops, money lending firms, etc., are exempt. This is not uniform, is it, Mr. Deputy Mayor, throughout the street? You're still going to have gaping teeth missing somewhere. And I just don't think it's fair on the people who have invested in their properties, sometimes at a financial cost because they've had to borrow the money, that they now are allowing neighbours who've not bothered to do anything with their shop fronts to bid for money, which is not even a payback, it's free money, to do something with their businesses. So I think they have a right to complain, and they have a right, I think, to be worried about how the council is dishing funded money out.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Callow, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The same subject. I welcome anything at all that makes the town look better, but there are just a few worries that I have. Do these businesses have to supply any funding themselves? Have we thought about the fact that some of these properties could be owned by multinational companies, some who may even be based abroad? I mean, have we looked into that before we say, yes, you can have a new shop front? Have we gone into it to see who actually owns these buildings? We don't want to be subsidising multimillionaires because it just wouldn't be right. I'm not crabbing it because I want the town to look better, but while we're at it, do you think we could look at the Yates's site and also the old Clifton Hotel, which still looks a mess, and I've stood on my feet now for years referring to Yates's and this hotel, and nothing seems to get done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on page 11, please? Page 12. Councillor Clapham, please.
It's my usual topic. I'm well pleased to see the Treasury Management Report. I did have a quiet word with Gillian after the last council, and she asked me whether I would like to see it back. I think all of us as members are pleased to see this. And if you go through it, you can see that the majority of the contracts are in Blackpool and Lancashire area, and it was also mentioned at the budget meeting by the leader of the council. So it's important to all of us. So well done, it's a good report. And congratulations to Colin, I note there, the civic attendant outsourcing, CD chauffeur hire Bolton, for getting the contract. As an ex-mayor of this town, I now know that we've got the best man for the job. Well done, Colin.
Thank you. Any further questions on what was page 12, page 13, page 14, 15? Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's regarding the discussions about moving the law courts. More and more cases now, Mr. Deputy Mayor, are being referred to Chorley, and it's been suggested by colleagues that I know that Blackpool courts may in fact close altogether, and that Chorley may become the hub for Blackpool cases. I'm just asking if the portfolio holder would perhaps try and look at that, find out why we're using Chorley more often, are we clogged up in the courts, etc. And in regard, just to reiterate, because I've done a little bit of adding up this week, and going back to a previous subject by my colleague, Mrs. Callow, Councillor Mrs. Callow, my calculations is that we received over £60 million in direct or indirect funding from the government, which is a lot more than a lot of other councils have done. So I can assure you that the Conservative government are looking at Blackpool, are caring for Blackpool, and will do more when new announcements are made about local funding in the new budget.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Callow, please.
Thank you. On the same subject, I see that for this study that we're receiving funding, external funding, from the Cabinet Office. I wonder if the portfolio holder could tell me how much that has cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Page 16. Councillor Clapham, sorry. Still 15, is it?
Actually, I note there that there are sites available for development of homes. Blackpool Road, I don't know where that will possibly be. So if you can identify that and send me a plan of that. I don't know where on Blackpool Road there is actually a site to build houses.
Thank you. Thank you. Page 16. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologise for asking so many questions, but you don't learn anything unless you ask. It's regarding the housing policy, and we did mention in the last council about how many houses we built down at Foxhall. I've got to say, and I don't mean this to be too critical, I don't think it's looking that grand at the moment. You've got washing hanging outside, you've got for sale signs up. What I was surprised to see is that the name of the streets. Talk about egos. We've got, is it Campbell Close, Taylor Terrace? So I'm led to understand. Are we about to see Councillor Hutton Drive? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? But yeah, why not? Yeah, we should do that and change the name of Blackpool to Williamsville. That would be great. Certainly Leslie and I would enjoy that. It's just that that's been pointed out to me, and I just wondered the reason for those names.
Thank you. Any further questions on Councillor Clapham, please?
It's underneath the housing enforcement civil penalties. I'm all in favour of this. I think this is great. We don't want anyone operating in the town illegitimately or in any other manner except to the right standards. But can I say that we should also implement the same standards on bad landowners in the town? Thinking in terms of Norbrec Road, the ex-Mariners site, which has been prominent in the press yet again. Chief exec, when he took his big red chair down Norbrec Road and sat out in the cold, I pointed out to him where it was by email, and he could see it was in the line of sight. So he's fully familiar with it, so are the enforcement officers, but it's gone on for years and years and years with Marquis Developments or a company with a similar name. Could we not have a more proactive force when it comes to usage of land in the town? It's bad enough seeing properties that are badly organised, badly run and run down and just used as cash cows. We also have the same problems with certain sites of land in the town that no one seems to care for. They don't fence them, they end up being used for dumping, and that's what I'd like to add to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Callow, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I rise to support Councillor Clapham. The Mariners is not in Norbrec, but it's directly across the road. So a lot of our residents think that it belongs to Peter and I in our ward, and we get numerous complaints, and it is an absolute eyesore. And they can't understand why a council like this can't do anything about it. And we also get complaints about the Norbrec Hotel and the amount of litter that is on their premises. And we get numerous complaints. In fact, one of our residents contacted us the other day and said that during last summer she'd gone along and filled 6 bin liners with rubbish out of the car park at the Norbrec Hotel. And she contacted the management to tell them and hadn't even had an acknowledgement. So really, you know, people think it's all rosy up there in Norbrec and Bispam, but we do have problems, and these 2 properties are actually letting the area down. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to page 17, please. Any questions? Sorry, Councillor Clapham, please.
Won't take long, Mr Deputy. It's just the development of the former Malibu and Astoria Hotel. We had a presentation on this at a joint board meeting. There's scrutiny for looking at the boards that we actually control within the borough. And this is a superb way of using money and bringing old stock properties back into domestic use. They're of the highest standard, and the more work that goes along in this line, the better, because it's like using brownfield sites and putting new life back into it. We do have control of the landlords and the standards for the tenants that are there. Superb.
Thank you. Questions, page 18, please. And general questions, please. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Just a sort of a forward-thinking question in terms of events coming towards the end of August and September. And the reason I ask it now is last year it was almost too late to ask the question. It's about the illuminations. And the question I wanted to ask is, do we have any plans or investment that we're looking into to actually create some new tableaus this year? And the reason why I'm asking it now is it's too late to ask in September. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Owen, please.
Thanks, Mr Deputy. It's a comment on the tourism aspects of the item before us. Something rather sad and something perhaps is missing. Kenneth Arthur Dodd died on the 11th of March at his home in Liverpool, but his spiritual home was here in Blackpool, treading the boards of our theatres. His first professional date was in 1954 at Nottingham Empire, when he gave up his job as a commercial traveller and took a tentative step as For most of us who admire the bravery of anyone on his own, on a stage, who can confidently hold an audience in the palm of his hands, yet off stage can be so unassuming, retiring even, utterly kind and easygoing, one who could talk with crowds and keep his voice, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. Doddy was nearly everyone's comic genius. Not everyone liked him, Mr. Deputy. He may have been a Tory. He may have been a fan of Margaret Thatcher. He may have been interested in his tax. But he left that corpse acquitted. As he used to say on stage, income tax was invented 200 years ago at tuppence in the pound. My trouble, I thought it still was. He loved Blackpool's holiday crowds, and they loved him. He was a valuable resource to our theatres. Managers knew his box office power meant profit for them. He has been worth thousands annually to our leisure industry. I can look back with nostalgia with my knowing him from the 1970s. The ground had been kept by its owners empty and alone for nearly 4 years and was saved from demolition by the determination of a small group of fanatics. I can speak as one of only 2 of us left surviving friends of the ground who floated the company which presented 2 weeks of theatre, Godspell and Fallen Angels, before bingo stalls were screwed onto the stage. We then had the task of raising the money to buy the theatre. I wrote as Secretary of the Friends of the Ground to Ken, and he gladly became the patron of our appeal. And that, in fact, was the message he gave us at the time. Without the money that his efforts brought in, his late-night performances starting at 10:45 p.m., I don't think we could ever have developed the momentum to buy the theatre. He was simply an inspiration. His passing will mean a heavy loss of revenue for our Grand Theatre. How do we fill those October nights during the illuminations? The Opera House stage for the annual Magic Circle will miss him. We all will. Stage folks all like to think that whatever the calamity, the show must go on. Sadly, sometimes the show comes to a cruel, grinding halt. But at Ken Dodd, the memories, Mr. Deputy, will linger on.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. And in keeping with Mr. Dodd, you went past your finishing time. But we gave you some allowance, obviously. So thank you so much. I think those of us that saw Ken Dodd and actually met him know what a wonderful gentleman he was. And yeah, certainly Councillor Mrs. Coleman and I, we spent a week at one of his shows one night, because that's how long, and what wonderful experiences there were. So thank you, Councillor Owen. Any further comments or questions, please? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I wonder, I think I'll have to declare a personal interest being the chair of Blackpool Transport. It was just, I wondered if Councillor Campbell would agree with me the tremendous work that our local...
Sorry?
I think I have to declare a personal interest as well in this item.
I'm not sure what the question's going to be.
That a wonderful job, I'm saying, that our local drivers have done all these months on the rail replacement. They've not had one complaint, and it's been, really tremendous. So much so, they were able to carry on and do this other 3 weeks, sadly, that the train is not on for Easter. But they're also have had inquiries, could we go further afield and do while the other rail replacement is being done? And I think the secret here is getting other authorities' buses to the stage that our buses are at and our local transport. And I do think it's something we ought to be very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Benson, did you have a... Yeah.
Personal.
I too have a personal interest in that, being a rail replacement coordinator, that I try to keep secret to my colleagues out there, the other stuff like. So thank you for that, Councillor Wright. Thank you. Any further questions or comments, please? Thank you. Councillor Campbell, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Councillor Williams, property improvement funds, not fair on those who have invested. No, I would agree. It's not fair on those people who have invested. I suppose, in a way, we're hoping that because people have invested, and granted this isn't fair either, we may have less of a call on that money, if you will. So we may be able to go to other streets, because we have had other people asking who are just outside the boundary whether or not they can have the money. So, yeah, I agree. Not much I can do about that, unfortunately. Councillor Mrs Callow, they can apply for up to 95% of the cost, but they do have to put 5% in themselves. I think it would be great if we could get whole streets that look much better. Obviously, these streets are on the run-up to the new conference centre as well. We obviously want to create a fantastic impression when people are coming to conferences. But we've also I've got every confidence in the team to do the correct checks, so we're making sure that, you know, it's not a multinational company that's actually applying for that money, because that would be dreadfully unfair. When it comes to the Yates and Clifton, yeah, I feel as though I'm banging my head against a wall. No, I'm just as anxious as you to see both of those areas improved. So, you know, we are chasing them basically every week to see what's happening. I am informed that the Clifton Hotel does have a new management company, but I did see it myself the other day there. There doesn't seem to have been much improvement at all, so I shall chase them for you. Councillor Clapham, you're pleased about the contracts. I'm pleased that you're pleased. It's fantastic. No, it is really nice to see local people getting these contracts. It's nice. I think there's a lot more people bidding now as well, so obviously the process must be easier. And congratulations to Colin. He's away? Yeah. Congratulations, Colin. Councillor Williams, when it comes to the courts, obviously I don't have much idea what happens in courts. Fortunately, I've never been in one. But I think the only real problem we've had was with the youth courts, and they had to be moved to Preston. I'm not sure about the Chorley thing. We can certainly look into it. But I think, unfortunately, the courts in Blackpool are too busy for them not to have a court in Blackpool, which is a sad state of affairs, but true. Funding of over 60 million, yeah, I get that, I totally get it, and we totally appreciate it, but, you know, the compound total of what we have lost as a council is £680 million. So, it's lovely, it's very much appreciated. It does make a little bit of a difference when it comes to capital projects, but it in no way, you know. Councillor Mrs Callow, I don't have the cost for that, I'm afraid. We will find that out for you. Councillor Clapham, Blackpool Road, yeah, I thought that when I seen it. I think it might just be one house, I'm not sure. But I've not had much involvement in that. That's obviously the cabinet member for housing. If she's ready, I could, at the end of this, pass it on and see if she can maybe give you an answer to that. Councillor Williams, Foxhall Village. People are allowed to put washing out, Councillor. Come on.
Well, you can see it from Friday,
Eden Way, you mean? Yeah. Yeah, but people are allowed to drive a washing.
You have a good eyesight.
Yeah. So I'm not going to enforce against that, I'm afraid. Yeah. When it comes to the street names, though, I can tell you, they're named after the Blackpool football team of 1953. Yes, it's complete. I believe there is a Campbell House, though. That might be named after me. I'm not sure. Councillor Clapham, civil penalties. Yeah, that's a really good piece of legislation that I've been keen for us to use for a while. And I'm looking forward to our first case, shall we say. But no, you're right, bad landowners, and this will cover yours as well, Councillor Callow. The Mariner site is a disgrace. I need to hold them to account for that. is on my radar. We have just recently started up again, there was a bit of a lull, but we've started again the problematic empty properties group. So we can certainly add land to that as well if you would like. When it comes to the Norbrick Hotel in Litter, we could possibly get the street scene guys out to see if there's anything they can do to threaten them, find them. I'm not sure. I will speak to Jez Evans. Yeah. Councillor Clapham, the Malibu in Astoria. You're pleased with it? Isn't it fantastic? Have you been inside? Or did you? Ah, right. You should go to the penthouse. It's amazing. It is a really good piece of work by My Blackpool Home. And that is the standard for every refurbishment that they do. Obviously, taking out these two hotels has taken out a massive antisocial behaviour issue in that area as well. The residents are extremely happy with it, and the tenants are very well settled, and they love their new houses. But as I say, we've got about 200 units at the moment. It just keeps growing every week. So we hope to have 800 fairly shortly. Councillor Gelly, illuminations. Now, I know for certain there is one new tableau coming up. Definitely one, possibly more. I shall ask Richard Ryan and I'll drop you an email, okay? Councillor Owen, your tribute to Ken Dodd, very lovely. We have, I was speaking to the leader about this actually. Obviously we'd still like to have a museum, and if that happens, we need to have a little tribute to Ken Dodd in that. And he said something about an apple, an orange and a piece of string. I didn't quite get it, but seemingly it was one of his jokes. And if you've ever been at one of Ken Dodd's nights, you would get that reference. So, and Councillor Wright, Blackpool Transport, the rail replacement buses. Yes, absolutely fantastic. We're just really lucky that Blackpool Transport could do as Northern Rail asked and put the buses on, because I don't know if you've seen any other ones, they're not very nice. But it just shows, you know, it's an example of a contribution by our wholly owned company. They're very fast and nimble on their feet, and it is fantastic. Great buses. I have been on a bus. I'm going to use the tram next week. And that's it from me. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Campbell, you can sit down and relax now. Thank you. So, Councillor Wright, did you have something to add? Sorry.
Well, it's just in reply regarding the Blackpool Road. I've got to be honest, I don't know the quantities of houses we're talking about, the same as the one which is the old school on Bisping Road. So I can find out for you, but unfortunately, you know, it's not like plans have been drawn or anything like that yet.
Thank you. Thank you. So we move on to the Cabinet Secretary's report. Councillor Kane is not here, of course, so Councillor Cross, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm quite happy to present the report and answer any questions that I can. Clearly, I'm not as good as Councillor Kane. He's not here. So I will do my very best. There was just one thing that I wanted to mention. It was something very nice from an opposition member. Councillor Galley did send me an email today talking about some of the work that he'd done with Neil Froggatt and the Green Team from our Blackpool Centre for Independent Living, and he's given us some great feedback, so of course I will pass that on to them, and thank you very much for sending me that email. Happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. So questions please on page 19. Page 20, 21, 22, 23, page 24. Any general questions, please? You know. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor. It seems that Blackpool continues to get into various national charts. But one chart I was very disappointed in seeing this week, and it isn't a political point, it's just a sad case. There was a report in one of the dailies about sexual child abuse in Telford. It's been going on for some time and it's quite bad. And in the report it said that Telford was third in the country for child sexual abuse cases behind Rotherham and Blackpool. And when I checked on the figures, percent per ward, Talbot ward is the worst of all by quite some distance. What gets measured gets done. It's something you can't foresee, you can't predict. It happens at all levels of social life in the council, Mr Deputy Mayor. But I was very disappointed to read that we are in the highest percentage of child abuse cases in the UK. I just thought I'd bring it to our attention in case we didn't know that. And we should be aware of it. Everybody in Blackpool should be aware of it. It's not a happy story, it's not a happy place to be, but it does give rise to some of the reasons why we do have so many children in care. And it's a true state. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Mrs Callow, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I see that this portfolio also covers leisure services. So if I could just touch on Moore Park and the parking facilities there. I had a very distressing phone call yesterday from a lady who was very sadly disabled. She was going to pay a visit to her doctor, so she parked on what was the correct disabled parking spot, put her badges up, and she was only in the surgery 3/4 of an hour. She came out and she'd got a ticket. This lady is so badly disabled that she can't park in the street and walk to the surgery. She has now got a fine to pay. I'm doing my utmost to try to help her on this, but this lady is on a fixed income. She was absolutely heartbroken, and if this is happening to this lady, I know it is happening to other people. We have a responsibility. Moore Park Baths are there, they're ours. We've got a doctor's surgery there. Wouldn't you think that they would look into the parking problems there and the people who are operating the car park? It is absolutely disgraceful. I know that many people have complained to our Member of Parliament, and that the problem is you get absolutely nowhere with this parking firm. They don't answer the phone, the emails, they don't want to know. All they want is their money, and it's £40 fine if you pay it within 4 weeks. If it's over 4 weeks, it's £70. So if somebody's trying to fight the case, they could then have moved on to 4 weeks. And to say that we've got a doctor's surgery there, we've got council facilities, and we are allowing a car park to be operated by these people who don't seem to care at all about anybody, whether they're disabled or what. I think really we should get a grip on it and say they can no longer operate that car park, or put some decent signage up. But what I can't understand is if what this lady told me is correct, and she'd gone through all the procedures, why when she came out she had got a ticket. She lives on her own, she's disabled, she's on a fixed income, and she's at her wit's end, and I think it's disgraceful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I'll go back to page 23 if I could. I was just so astonished there was no questions for Councillor Cross that I missed it. I feel a bit hard done by now. It's just to say thank you to everyone who's been involved at the Grange. It's an absolutely marvellous facility. There is an open event, actually an open weekend, if you will, on the 13th and 14th of April. 13th is more corporate, the 14th is for the community. And I would just ask any members who want to go and have a look, come and see it. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm very pleased with my library. And also the new Grow at the Grange, we're calling it, which is in the back garden, what used to be the back garden. So yeah, just thank you to Public Health, to Street Life, to Neil Jack, who's been involved in all of it. And yeah, I hope you'll all come and visit us. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Williams, please.
Mr Mayor, it's just following on from my colleague, Councillor Mrs Callow. I know exactly what she's talking about. I've had 2 cases brought to my own attention of people parking in disabled spots at Moore Park. My daughter was one of them. She entered registration, she did everything right, and they've received letters from APCO, where is it? APCO A, or whatever they're called. And these are quite threatening, these letters, saying if you don't pay now, it'll be £70 next time. And if you don't get through that one, they threaten you with court action. I do believe that in most of the cases and the fines, they're not fines, they're charges, that the charges they put through, they don't follow through either. Very few cases have actually gone to court. But the distress of this and the work our officers have to do in clearing some of these fines is disgraceful. They've got to get it right. It's terrible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I attended on Friday the Celebration Achievement Award for our children and care leavers with Councillor Michelle Scott and Councillor Scott and Councillor Graham Kane. And I'm sure Councillor Kane would have, if he'd been here, would have made mention of what an inspiring and amazing evening it was. And it was also, to pay credit, Diane, your staff, the amount of organisation that went into it. But the children are amazing and the carers are fantastic, and it was a lovely evening. And without the staff's work, we wouldn't have been able to have that evening to say thank you and appreciate them. So I just wanted to pass that on, Diane. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benson, please.
Come all prepared, and I thought I'd just inform you all, because nobody's asking any questions, that Martin Primary School was inspected as the report, and that is a good school. And Waterloo Primary School continues to be a good school as well. And also I'd like to just agree with you, because I've just paid £70 fine in my work time as an NHS employer for parking at Moore Park when I was with a client, and I wrote and I appealed and they just ignored me. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I would just like to second what Councillor Lynn Williams has said about the Celebration of Achievement Awards last week, and congratulations to all the staff concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Cross, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Mayor. I got off a little bit easier than I thought, which makes a nice change. Councillor Williams, with regards to the child sexual abuse, obviously we all know about the Awaken team, we all know the efforts that children's services have gone to in the past to try and resolve some of the issues, even down to the council doing things like training cab drivers to spot the symptoms and causes that can be around that, and obviously can then report it. We are obviously looking at our front door to take appropriate action. There has been a group that's been set up to look at this specifically, and they will be taking into account any support that's needed for people that are identified early in that particular case. So obviously it's something that's constantly in our minds. Just because it's going on in the back rooms and the back doors of the council doesn't mean to say that obviously it's not a continued effort and continued work on. In terms of Moore Park, I myself have had some issues with this. As the ward councillor, I went and spoke to the facilities manager at Moore Park when this first started happening. I also got a comprehensive report from Paolo to do with the parking, because Paolo Perska was in control of parking at the time. And I wanted to know what was going on, because I had lots of residents ringing me up. And he basically turned around to me and said, well, actually, the council did offer to do parking services for that particular building. It was offered in the past and declined. The council do not manage and maintain that building. That building was handed over to the NHS. So the NHS have chosen to go with Parking Eye, which is the parking service. And they did not give us any say, they did not give us any ability to input. Like I say, we offered them the service, they declined that. I have since been in touch with the people that now own the car park and the rights to the car park. I've had some further information from them to say that actually anybody that was unaware of the new signs or anything that was new at the time has actually been contacted, and they have had their tickets rescinded. So that's from the knowledge that they gave me at the time, so all I'm doing is passing on the message. And we've also... Yeah, I know, well, she's... look, we can't make exceptions for people like Councillor Benson. I understand that. And there's been a lot of people that have been at work or been going to the doctors, etc., and they've been charged. So what I would suggest is that you do write to them and you do fight that, because it has been done previously. I can't answer you. I can't answer for Parking Eye, Councillor Benson. I'm sorry. I'd love to be able to. Well, unfortunately, I am continuing to do work with them. So I have received that information from them. I'm just giving you the information that I've currently got. I've, like I say, had many angry residents onto me about it. So, but I have been in contact with them, and that's what they've told me to do. So I would suggest that you recommend the same thing. If we're still getting complaints in a couple of months' time, when everybody will be aware, because all the signs are now up. There's now the new sign in the reception telling people where they need to put the registration in if they've parked in a disabled bay, etc. All those things have been done. There's nothing I can do to get them to change their operating system because they will not allow us to do their parking. So that's where we're up to. Councillor Campbell has mentioned the Grange and the launch. Thank you very much for that update, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Williams and Councillor Scott have mentioned the Care Leavers Awards. Thank you very much for mentioning that. I understand it was a lovely evening. And Councillor Benson, Martin and Waterloo Schools. That's fantastic news, but again, I'm really sorry, but I can't have your parking ticket rescinded. I'd love to, but I can't. So there we go. And that's everything in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cross. We move on, please, to the report of the Combined Fire Authority. I believe Councillor Jackson.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor. I present the report, willing to answer any questions. There's Councillor Williams and Councillor Councillor Coleman, yes, she's over there, who are members as well. By and large, the authority works on a non-political stance, really. We very rarely get into political arguments. We work together, and it's a good authority to be on. It's one of the leading authorities in the country for fire and rescue. I'd just like to draw your attention to page 28, because that's a typical example of how the fire authority here in Lancashire and throughout the country, because this is a UK event, work in other countries. They deploy fire people who are willing to go in their own time over to other countries, helping in difficult situations, earthquakes, all sorts of events. And that report there about the emergency medical team in Bangladesh is just typical of the work the fire authority does. The members themselves, the people who work for the fire authority, who give up their own time to go to other countries and help. And that's, you know, really to be applauded for these people.
Thank you. So, do we have any questions, please, on the report? Sorry, Councillor Williams, did you want to add something? Sorry.
I'd just like to concur with everything my colleague, Councillor Jackson, said about the authority. And I think we've both just been appointed to a task force, which is looking at the way the fire authority can work with other blue light emergency services. There's some pluses and some minuses in that. And again, it won't be a political decision. It'll be a decision made for the best for the combined fire authority. But needless to say that the police commissioner is very keen in more entanglement, I would say, rather than involvement with the fire authority. But we'll be looking at the pros and the pluses and the minuses of that at the first task force meeting, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So, Councillor Mrs. Callow, I believe, question, please, on the report.
Yes, on page 25, it says that that the authority were pleased to note that Lancashire County Council's full council meeting, they've decided that all schools, all new Lancashire County Council schools and major school extensions have to have sprinklers. I wonder when any new schools or extensions come to our planning committee, if we could stipulate that they had to have sprinklers. I did raise the problem of car parks, in particular multi-storey, having sprinklers at the last meeting, because as you may be able to remember, there was a horrendous fire in Liverpool at a multi-storey car park. Unfortunately, nobody was injured, but a lot of the cars were obviously destroyed. And I was told by Councillor Campbell that it would be too expensive, that it would cost millions. But when I cast my mind back to when I was on the fire authority, it was something like £120,000 to put sprinklers in a new school. I understand now that the cost of living has gone up and building costs have gone up, but I wondered if our planning department could stipulate that any new schools or large buildings that were built in Blackpool, that they had to have sprinklers to get planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Callow. Any further questions on the report? Councillor Jackson, would you like to respond, please?
I thank Councillor Williams for his comments. Yes, we have set a task force up. We're meeting for the first time next Wednesday. Basically, what's happening here is and I think this is coming down from the government, unfortunately, is that they're expecting police commissioners to take over the running of the fire authorities throughout the country. And this is not acceptable to the members of the Combined Fire Authority in Lancashire. On both sides? On both sides, yes. Both sides are agreed on this, and so this task force is being set up to see how we can continue to work with the police and with the ambulance. We do a fantastic job. I mean, I'm the road safety champion for the fire authority, and I go to a lot of presentations on the accidents that happen on our highways, and the work that goes on there and the cooperation between the police, the ambulance and the fire service is tremendous. And many times it's the fire authority that lead on those events and get there first and deal with the situations that they have to deal with. So yes, this is a task force to look at what we're being asked to approve or not approve, and to work through this collaboration with these other authorities. In answer to Councillor Mrs Callow, I can't really answer for the planning department here in Blackpool, but obviously I think the fire authority would be supporting if we could do this. I know we've tried to do it in the past and ensure that sprinklers go into schools. Car parks is another one, but it would be a vast expenditure to put sprinklers into all Blackpool's car parks, but maybe it is something we need to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. We move on, please, to the report from the Chairman of the Audit Committee. Councillor Galley, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to present this report to members. I'll take the report as read. Before I do highlight a few points that I wanted to raise to the Chamber, I did want to say some thank yous. One is to Councillor Alms, as Vice Chair, who's worked really hard behind the scenes with the team to make some of these achievements possible, along with all the elected members. Sitting on the Audit Committee sometimes can feel like you've been thrown lots and lots of work missiles in terms of reading and papers and so on, but they've all really embraced it, and that's been one of the improvements that we've seen. There's been a lot of member training that's been undertaken, and it's been training that's been directed at members' needs, and it's started to pay dividends, which has resulted in improved officer surveys in terms of the way the committee is conducting itself. The other thing that we've seen is, as a result of this Chamber's support, is the addition of an independent member, somebody with direct accounts experience, again raising the game of the committee in terms of its independence and its scrutiny. And that's allowed us to deliver some good solid achievements which CIFRA would be pleased with, which is involved calling in directors to explain if they're behind on fixing certain issues that the committee has picked up on. I'd say allow for a greater level of appropriate challenge, and also, which I think is really important, is it's allowed an emphasis on cyber security, which currently has a net score of 20, which is one of the highest in the council. It's one of our biggest threats, and it has raised the profile of that threat. But also, it's created something that, when I first took on the role, I was always really keen. I think I said to Councillor Benson once, I want to turn this into a really sexy committee, which is a bold statement for audit. I know, I'll never forget it. And even by my standards, that was a brave thing to say. But I actually think it's not me that's actually allowed this committee to stand on its own feet. It's probably events that surrounded it. The council view on risk has completely changed in the 3 years that we set this committee up in its own right. Risk, as Steve Thompson will tell us, as a council, we now have an appetite to take on risk. And risk in itself is becoming very much a positive thing, not a scary thing. And where the audit committee sits with risk is we like to provide or make sure that there's robust scrutiny, allowing officers to know what the procedures are, allowing us to protect those officers to deliver that risk and the services that we need. At the same time, it protects the public. And as one officer said to me, it allows our departments to dare to be different, and that's what risk does if we manage it properly, and that's what the audit committee should do. It allows us to create positive processes that protect our officers. In terms of the a few notes for elected members that aren't on the audit committee, I've drawn the attention towards cyber security. If there are any training courses that come up as regards cyber risk or cyber security, please do go on them. It is one of our biggest vulnerabilities, and the same applies to whistleblowing. If you're not sure of the process, you can come to myself, Councillor Ounds, or our Chief Internal Auditor. And in respect of our Chief Internal Auditor and the audit team, we have an incredible team, and they've done us proud this year. So happy to take any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Thank you. Do we have any questions on the report, councillors, please? No questions on the report? Would you like to stand up again, Councillor Galley? Or? Thank you. Thank you for an excellent report. We move on, please, to the pay policy statement. Councillor Campbell, I believe, to move the recommendation to the council.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yes, pay policy statement is what it is. It's obviously been through the Chief Officer's Employment Committee, and then it comes to us to ratify. And just really, yeah, it is what it is, and I'd just like to approve the recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Cross, I believe.
Formally second, Deputy Mayor, reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Do you have any comments, questions, please, councillors? Would you like to respond, reply, Councillor Campbell? Thank you. Shall we take a vote on this then? Those in favour, please show your hands. Those against? So, it is passed. It is passed. We move on to the motion, please. Telephone boxes and antisocial behaviour. Councillor Humphreys to move the motion, please. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just talk about the proposal. It seems to have caused a bit of confusion. I don't want to shut down all phone boxes. I don't have a hatred for phone boxes. There are many lovely phone boxes in Blackpool. Some of them are listed. What I am concerned with is that in the century that we now live in, which is the 21st century, that we are trying to get Facebook and other forms of media to take responsibility for what happens in and around their particular means of communication. And the phone boxes that I'm talking about are ones where they are in particular built up and possibly deprived areas where they are collecting points for young people who then don't have anything to do, then abuse the phone box, wreck it to a point where it might not work, but also that inside the phone box there are adverts for illicit things that you can do, and also you may be able to ring people and do a small drug deal. And a lot of phone boxes around Blackpool certainly get money from those two forms of business. Therefore, I would like British Telecom to take some sort of moral lead and understanding that if their phone box is making a profit, because that's one of their reasons for keeping the phone box. If you ask for a phone box to be removed, they go, well, it's making a profit, we're not going to take it away. Well, if their profit is coming from those sort of actions, they need to take a moral responsibility for finding out if that is true, and if it is true, closing it down. And I would like to write a letter to the, or the Chief Exec to write a letter to the Home Office, to actually write a letter to the Chief Exec of British Telecom to ask them to take a moral responsibility, like they have done with Facebook, like they have done with all sorts of other forms of social media, because it is something that is important. It is something that is important to all communities across the country, particularly any community that has drug problems or antisocial behavioural problems, which are manifested by some telephone boxes. Those are the only ones that I want to close down. All the other ones, pretty red ones, the K7s, the K5s, that are listed, I do not want them to disappear. I just want ones that are causing problems. and without them the problems will be reduced. So if nobody has any objection to this motion, I would like it to be passed by the Chamber. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Humphreys. I believe Councillor Ryan to second.
Formally seconding the motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Do you have any comments on the motion, please? Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. First off, Councillor Humphreys, we are going to support your motion, but I think it's badly written, to be quite truthful about you, that phone boxes don't cause problems. It's the people that use them in the way you state cause the problems, and I would rather see them go than the phone boxes. It's as simple as that. But I am concerned that phone boxes, these are four-sided phone boxes, are smelly places to be, horrible environments, and I do think the people operating these boxes should be more responsible in what they're doing. But by taking the drug dealers out of the phone boxes, they only use those as a reference point for collection or delivery or whatever, and possibly occasionally the phone calls themselves. You'll only move them somewhere else. You'll move them to a bus stop or you'll move them to a tram shelter. To some people, public phones are an absolute necessity. Not everybody has a mobile phone now. And if you're in the street and you're attacked and you want to dial 999, it could be the only way to do it, especially if you've had your phone pinched. But we do support the ethos of what you're saying, and I wasn't going to add an amendment to it and make it longer and stronger. Let's just get this through and send it off. But I do think on a ward-to-ward basis, this is a ward issue. We've had a couple of phone boxes on our wards taken away for the same reason. But you've got to understand there may be some legislative agreement that you have to have so many public phone boxes within a certain amount of catchment area. So I understand what you're saying, appreciate what you're saying. You don't want to see them all go, you don't hate them. But I would rather see, if you know they're being used for drugs, if you know they're being used for immoral purposes, and get some sort of log going on that and catch the people that are doing it, because that's the way you're going to stop it. And yes, you know, if you talk about adverts in phone boxes, go in any phone box in London, they're littered. Absolutely littered. And there's guys going around on bikes filling them up all the time. But to me, on a general statement on phone boxes in Blackpool, most of them are unkempt, they're dirty, they want cleaning, they're just boxes for adverts, and some of them look unsightly. But we will accept and support your motion on that. But I do think it's worthy of further discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. As might be anticipated, this is a bit of an issue in Claremont Ward, and we've had our antisocial behaviour officer has approached one of the companies, because it isn't always British Telecom. I think there's 3 different companies who are involved with it. We're awaiting their response, but obviously having talked with other councillors, became aware that there is an issue across many wards. After discussions with Councillor Campbell, we'd spoken with enforcement. I understand that it's currently with legal or awaiting, because we are aware that a number in times past that phone boxes have been got rid of, closed down. But obviously as the legislation changes and different powers become available, so that's what the enforcement officers have done. We're waiting to hear from legal as to what is happening. I can accept to a point what Councillor Williams says in relation to the uses but the phone boxes are not used as they should be, and the companies are not spending the money. They are simply there for advertising, and they don't want to spend any more money because all it is a cash cow to them. And I think that's the issue. They need to spend money on the ones that are used to bring those up to a standard, and the ones that simply aren't used, that unfortunately are just used for other nefarious purposes, need to go. And that's what we're waiting the legal advice for the enforcement team, and then that can be undertaken ward by ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, just to really agree with what has already been said. As Councillor Williams says, we have had various discussions about telephone boxes. There are problematic ones. I don't think we'll ever eradicate the things that go on. There's nothing more disgusting than walking into a telephone box that is being used as a toilet, so I think you're right. We need to tell them that they need to take more care of them if they're going to keep them, because some of them are listed. But more than anything, I'm really glad to hear that Councillor Humphreys doesn't dislike all telephone boxes, especially the red ones, because we've got the new Marvel exhibition opening this weekend at Madame Tussauds, and we need somewhere for the superheroes to change. Thank you, Mr Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any further comments, please? Councillor Humphreys, right to reply.
Thank you for all these supportive comments. I'd just like to say that I think one of the things with particularly with the use for drug transactions, although it will potentially move it somewhere else, it will also make it slightly more difficult. And I'm quite happy to try and do anything that will make that sort of thing more difficult. And yes, I know that it's not the general panacea that I might hope it would be. And my apologies if it wasn't particularly well written, but the plainer or easier to read motion that I had a go at last time hasn't got me anywhere, so I thought I'd go for more complicated. Maybe this one might work, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. So we'll move to the vote, please. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? So the motion's carried, Councillor Humphreys. Congratulations. Thank you, colleagues, for a very respectful and convivial evening. That brings us to the end of business. Thank you. Thank you.